Good morning. Greetings and welcome to the inaugural Bright Idea Executive Roundtable. My name is Todd Olson. It's my pleasure to host and moderate a fantastic panel of experts in implementing innovation at scale. First, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. This webinar is interactive by design, and I'll be leading a Q&A with our three panelists. While we have some pre-planned questions, we are excited to take suggestions from you. You will be on mute for the duration of this webinar, but we'd encourage you to enter your questions in the Q&A section of WebEx as you think of them. At the end, we'll select questions from you to ask our panel live. If you do not hear your question answered during the webinar, there will be a follow-up email. All questions will be answered. This webinar will be recorded, and an email will follow shortly with the link. Capitally, we'd encourage you to use social media to share your perspectives during the webinar. The hashtag for this event is #BI Roundtable. Now, I'd like each of the panelists to introduce themselves. Let's start with Chip Gliedmann from Forrester Research. Chip?
Thanks, Todd. I'm Chip Gliedmann. I am Vice President and Senior Analyst at Forrester Research, looking at business technology issues, including innovation and governance and customer satisfaction. I've been doing this for almost 20 years.
Great. Thanks, Chip. Sabrina?
Good afternoon. I'm Sabrina Prouty. I've been with Humana for 7.5 years, and I am a strategic consultant leading our Insights integration team, who's responsible for open innovation and crowdsourcing for the enterprise. I have 2 boys, and I love watching them play sports.
Great. Thanks, Sabrina. And Matt?
Hi, I'm Matt Greeley. I'm the founder and CEO of Bright Idea, and I'm an avid sailboat racer.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Now, I would briefly like to take a poll of the audience to have you, the audience, introduce yourselves to our panelists. You should see a poll in the bottom right of your screen. And the question is, how would you rate your innovation maturity? A, it's just a buzzword that sounded interesting. B, we're doing some light idea capture. C, we've started to get some results. D, we've been doing it for a while and are continuing to improve. Or E, we're awesome and we should be panelists as well. Please take a moment to select an option and submit your answer.
So
we're just going to wait a few more seconds. We're just going to wait a few more seconds and show the results here.
So while they're answering the question, I should add to my bio, I'm a big hockey fan.
Thanks, Chip.
Who's your team, Chip?
Actually, these days it's the Rangers, but
wow.
I'm actually also still playing at 57, and so I should say It's the old dogs.
Well, awesome. Well, now we see the results here in the bottom right. Thanks a lot, folks, for taking the time to share that with us. Now we're going to move right into the questioning. The first question is for Chip, and that is, why does innovation matter?
Well, I think that it's clear that if you don't innovate, I think the quote, and I'm not sure who said it, I was trying to track it down, but the line is, innovate or die. The business cycles have shortened themselves. Customers and consumers have access to information and products and services from all over the world that are being developed and delivered at faster and faster rates. And basically, if you do not continue to improve and get some advantage over your competitors, somebody will come along and take your customers away and take your market away. And I think you can just look at some of the companies that were market leaders for years and years, who over the course of a couple of years have just disappeared from sight. Not just online, but brick and mortar retailers, service providers, companies that have been in business for 100 years just, in theory, can go away almost, in the blink of an eye if someone innovates. So if you can't stay ahead of your competition, somebody will get ahead of you.
Great. Now, Sabrina, I just want to follow up with you. Why does innovation matter to Humana?
Well, I think it was simply put by Chip, which is, business leaders don't have all the answers today. And in our industry of healthcare and the continuous changing environment, innovation for our future is a necessity to exist, sustain, and also grow to be leaders in the healthcare industry.
Great, great.
Yeah, unfortunately, if you're not a leader, you're basically, at risk of major catastrophe. So you have to continually, figure out what can I do next to maintain my lead, to increase my lead. Just staying in one place will see the whole world move, away from you.
And I think it's an understatement to say that the healthcare industry is undergoing a lot of change these days. You can imagine having an established business and then having all the change we've seen in the past year or so, kind of just show up on your doorstep.
Great. So I'm going to go back to Chip. Chip, what makes innovation different from other process improvement initiatives?
It's an interesting point, and actually we spent some time thinking about it. And when you start thinking about all of the things you can do, from what you're doing today, and now you start moving in terms of differences. Okay, there's a good picture here. So the bars in the background, the products, the processes, the way you address your markets, how you have your organization and processes in place, you're doing something now, let's say on the left side of that bar. And then there's a whole domain of ideas, that egg-shaped thing that kind of overlays them, of where you can go with those. Now, you have incremental change. You have things you can do that move what you're doing slightly over, a step or two. Now, that's something we're all comfortable with. We all have governance processes for them. We all have ways to evaluate whether an incremental change makes sense. They're standardized. They're low risk. You've got, operational changes, mandatory changes. You know about them. You do a business case for them. You evaluate them. You want them to succeed. If we flip over to the other side, there are major changes that a business makes. Buying another company, merging, entering new geographies, major reorganizations, major products being released or not that have a large investment of capital required. Now, those are, usually only a few of them over any period of time. They're usually high risk. The motivation from them likely came from very high in the organization. They're large scale, and you have to make them work because there's so much at stake. So you've got the things on the side incrementally that you want to make work. You're looking for 100% success rate once you fund it. And you've got the radical stuff, which is, the same thing, high risk, but you need to make it work because it's high stakes. Then there's a piece in the middle. And that's a different world. Basically, someone has an idea, and now you have to decide whether that idea will provide business value. It's likely at first you can't write a business case for it because it's a new idea, so you have to explore it. So the governance models and the ROI models and the way you would normally consider funding it it won't apply because you need to be thinking about how do I incubate, how do I prototype it, how do I explore it further, how do I find out if it's viable. So that's a different world. The world's on the ends, you want to be successful every time. This world in the middle, you're likely wanting people to take more risk. Actually, why don't you go to the next chart? I sort of summed them up, I think, on the next slide. So the difference is distinct as opposed to either limited or extreme. It's not, it's not necessarily something that comes from the top or from an existing group. It can come anywhere: customers, partners, employees, academia. It's the idea can come from everywhere. But as you move down, you see the success rates change from 100% incremental. Once something is funded and set into a project management group or a product management group, you want all of the business case numbers to come true. And the radical, likewise, you want that. But in the center range, you're thinking more like a venture capitalist. You're thinking that you want something maybe on the 50 to 70, 50 to 80% success rate, and it's likely going to take a few iterations before you 50% that are going to succeed. So this world is different. The governance models don't fit. The risk models don't fit. The investment models don't fit. But managing and capturing and developing a process to make that innovation part of the continuum sustained and self-fulfilling and self-growing is absolutely critical to that need to continually innovate in your marketplace.
Great, thanks. Thanks for that, Chip. So the next question we have is, why do people have problems with innovation? What are some of the key challenges people face when they go to implement innovation programs?
Well, there's a lot of problems that people have. Actually, I think slide 10 has some results of a survey we did that can begin to address some of those issues. We asked a number of people why they were having problems with their innovation, and in one case, in many cases, they had restraints in terms of time and money. Time, people, money. It's hard to carve out resources for innovation because it's usually something that's going to be, not the next cycle, but 2 or 3 away. If you think about the incremental as being the next, 1 day to 12 months, innovation and that really thinks in a 9, 12 months to 5-year time frame. So to get people to devote resources that could otherwise be spent towards making their immediate numbers and looking more distant and with less, guarantee of the results is hard to find. And so you can see the biggest constraints are in finding that bucket of resources, financial, people, whatever. And then obviously, how do you now deal with this thing that's different from anything you know about? There are processes in place for the governance. There are processes in place for the radical. But you need to establish new processes for that. And then the rest of them basically all come down to culture. We've worked for 40 years to remove risk from business. And now as we start to think about innovation, we're now trying to add it back in. And that's something that's very difficult. Now, again, when you ask people to do time slicing and spend part of their time on the incremental, on the operational, where you want them to think about risk being bad, and then put that aside and now half their time think about innovation where risk is good, it's tough. It's hard on the brain to go back and forth between those two worlds. It's hard to figure out metrics for success and measure somebody if they have to be thinking in these two different directions. Plus, they're always going to be pulled back to that operational stuff, which has the short-term impact. So the resources, the processes, and then the culture become sort of these three big buckets on why people have issues in innovation.
Great. Thanks a lot, Chip. Sabrina, we'd love to hear from you and see, do these challenges align with some of the challenges Humana's faced?
Absolutely. I agree with everything that Chip said. You know, and what I'd like to add is, you know, this doesn't happen overnight. You know, from the Humana team, we've been doing this for 2 years now. We've been partners with Bright Idea, and, you know, we started out as a very small team. It was 2 of us who started out 2 years ago. Really, the objective was really to build the culture of innovation throughout Humana, and we used Bright Idea to really build awareness of key Humana priorities and to test the readiness of the culture for open innovation within the enterprise. And while we had a lot of success building the appetite for crowdsourcing and the appetite for innovation, we really had that need to show the so what as far as the ideas that we were getting in. So we were quickly becoming just a pipeline of ideas, and we really needed to have that change where we could share to our leaders and to those that were really sponsoring some of these challenges that we were running, why they should implement some of these ideas. So we did some research and looked at some best practice models to really understand what were our gaps in the process and what did we need to change in order to continue to push for this innovation shared service. You know, since that, in that 2 years' time, our team has grown to 6. We do sit within a culture and within an organization structure where we have a lot of scale and visibility to the priorities and strategies for Humana, which makes it a lot easier for us to align to those strategies, to ask the right questions to the right people, and really to get them to build the challenge around what they're trying to get out of it in the long run. So, you know, I feel like what we've done has really been, I guess, a plus and a step in the right direction. You know, by no means are we exactly where we need to be. We still have a long ways to go, but we have definitely shown a lot of success this past year just by implementing our shared service model and our as a consulting approach and really sharing those results with our sponsors.
Great. Thanks, Sabrina. Now, Chip, what's required to be successful at innovation? Do you have some advice here?
Sure. Actually, we thought about what you would need in the sense to have an innovation capability. We work a lot with business capability maps. We think about what does an organization need in terms of business capabilities to present a face to the marketplace, and then within each of those, what does this capability need to have? You know, a certain one. What does it need to be able to do in order to deliver on its expectations? So when we looked at the innovation role, we said, what capabilities do you need to have within an innovation role in order to make it work? And we came up with these 9. It's sort of a work in progress. And it may be 10 or 8 or 12 at different companies, but it's a start in terms of thinking about organizing the function and saying, well, if I'm going to be an innovation function, what do I have to be able to do? Well, I have to be able to manage the ideas that come in and turn them into products. I have to have the processes to implement the innovation program and these ideas, and I need to have control and governance over them. And so we sort of came up with those 3 tiers and then 3 within each, you know, ideation and then incubation or prototyping, and then the managing of the portfolio of ideas you've got. That needs to be supported by change management, incentives, and communications. And then underlying it all is some level of governance, funding model, and measurement to know that you're doing the right thing and you're getting the results and you're getting the right participation. So you can almost, you know, as Sabrina was talking about, you know, improving their maturity, you can think about where you might have to improve your maturity. If you don't have governance, it will be difficult to have an innovation program. If you don't have communications, if you don't work out the incentives, the change management, if you can't get the ideas and incubate them and manage the portfolio, if you have no way to measure them, you're putting major constraints and hurdles on your innovation program. So these are things to think about as you're implementing such a program in an organization. How are we going to do them? What are we going to use? And if you can work them out in advance and obviously refine them over time, it will help. And this also points to why a shared service model is also something that can be useful as it is at Humana, because once you basically box all these up and give it to one or a group of people, now they can optimize those. Again, they're not worrying about the time slicing, they're not worrying about conflicting goals, conflicting governance models. They have the ability to tailor these capabilities to their specific organization and optimize them over time.
Great, great. Now, Matt, you've had the opportunity to see a lot of innovation programs as well. What do you think is key to a successful program?
Well, we definitely have seen, a lot of different ways. Actually, Todd, if you could pull up slide 15 for me. We've seen a lot of different ways that companies try and augment innovation, and we're specifically focused on this dedicated innovation team. I mean, as Chip mentioned, you can do M&A, you can do R&D, but there's some inherent challenges that have been talked about, and maybe slide 16 now. You have this huge mandate, right? You have this small little team of 2 or 6 people, in Sabrina's case, are going to shift the whole culture of the company. That's really hard to do. And I think in a lot of ways there's a lot of complexity. If you go out to the blogs and you go out to hire consultants, you get these conflicting opinions on what to do first, what to do second. So what we found is that by using tools, you can augment the ability of this small team. It sort of gives them bionic arms to have a larger impact. Crowdsourcing can touch virtually everyone in the company and even outside the company if it's deployed correctly. And that tends to solve the scale problem, but there's still an organizational problem. There's how do I set up my innovation team relative to the rest of the organization so that we can be successful? And we've really zeroed in on this innovation as a shared service, and I'd love Sabrina to talk about their kind of journey, how they arrived at this as well. But just to explain what this means is, instead of just sort of having people in the company working on innovation and running around training, this is a very specific approach, and it basically has the innovation team act like your IT group would, where they're acting as a service to the other business units. If anyone in marketing or engineering needs a new laptop, IT shows up with that new laptop. If anyone in those groups needs to run a crowdsourced innovation challenge, the innovation team comes in and helps those people out with that challenge. And the reason we've seen this be successful is you have this dedicated team, they're full-time people, it becomes sort of a center of excellence where they can run these challenges all day, every day, maybe schedule 20 or 30 challenges over the course of a year, and they can get good at it. They can get good at asking the questions of the stakeholders, what topics they want to run, and how are we going to get people to participate, and make sure that they track the outcomes of this. And one thing that's really important is they're managing the crowdsourcing community across business units. So they kind of, the person in marketing may not really care about the people they're tapping into in another business unit, but the innovation team knows they need to go back to this community over time again and again, and they have to sort of defend the interests of that community, make sure there's feedback to those people, et cetera, et cetera. So, the long and short is this innovation as a shared service approach emerged out of working with lots and lots of customers, and it structurally solves a lot of problems. We heard a lot of times, actually I think I've got one more slide here on the next 19. We heard, hey, we're only a small team, how do we impact the whole company? Or I started strong but I've been losing steam, or the ideas are just sitting there, there's no follow through. So there's a lot of kind of challenges we're hearing as companies deploy this new crowdsourcing technology internally. And if we could just go back one, Todd. And what the shared service configuration does is it structurally solves a lot of these problems, because it it installs the innovation team in a supporting role to the other business units. They're not responsible for funding and implementing and having a team of engineers to actually create the ideas. They come into the business unit, they say, hey, what are your biggest business challenges? What are your top 3 that if you could solve them would really move the needle? And then they help that team who knows very little about crowdsourcing structure the topic and their communications and their approach to gain the insight of people that may be in other business units, other geographies, other time zones. And we think that this approach is really a great place to get started. It's sort of the easiest way to get introduced to crowdsourcing innovation internally.
Great, thanks, Matt. Now, Chip, have you seen this approach as well in some of the clients you've worked with?
Oh, absolutely. And there's no single model. You know, people have, you know, again, the dedicated R&D, where you'd be wanting to look at the R side of it. You'd want to be looking at the shared services. You need to have the business sponsorship, you know, involved in them. And so sometimes they're buried in product groups or chartered there. We've seen innovation groups actually in the HR department, where their goal was customer engagement, employee engagement, and the innovation program was, you know, the trigger for that. So there's a lot of different things, but all of them are designed around the idea of bringing people in who know how to manage this process and sharing their ability across the organization as needed.
Gotcha. Now, Matt, are there any tips and tricks to successful implementation or any examples that you can share around this?
Well, I think that the key here is that you know, you're not, you know, by adopting this innovation as a shared service approach, you're not really doing heart surgery on the organization. And what I mean by that is, you know, you don't have to move a pool of engineers out of R&D under the innovation team. You can have the innovation team come in and help R&D to get the insights that solve their problems. And you know, we've seen in a bunch of different industries, you know, in healthcare and high tech and pharmaceutical, where the business challenge existed for, you know, 20 or 30 years, and then they put it out there for crowdsourcing. And they asked people for solutions beyond the one business unit that had that business challenge. And oftentimes an engineer is an engineer. If you throw a problem in front of them, it's like throwing a steak to a lion. You know, they're just all over it. And you know, you throw a mechanical engineering problem or something like that in front of engineers, they're going to want to engage with that. And what we've seen is that the people outside the business unit have basically been able to look at the problem from a different perspective. And then once that insight emerges, the sponsoring business unit can take it and run with it, build prototypes, and fund the project and implement it. So, you know, the tips and the tricks would basically be try to disrupt your current organization as little as possible. And I think that the shared service model really does that. It brings in the expertise when you need it, but then it still allows the core business units to execute on the insights and the ideas that come in. And I think that's a lot. It's a lot friendlier story to sell as opposed to like, hey, can we move 10 engineers out of R&D into this innovation group?
Right, and if I can add to that, this is Chip. You know, again, you're basically, you know, building a level of expertise in a process and then sharing it across the organization. Coming up with a challenge, you know, having a problem is not hard. You know, it's not hard to identify a problem, but then abstracting that problem into a challenge to get the maximum participation and maximum value out of the entire ecosystem is something of an art. And that's something that can be taught and improved upon. And so it makes sense to have a group of people who know how to do that generically. Likewise in incentives and in governance and in knowing which questions to ask in order to decide whether something is good. These are things that can be leveraged multiple times regardless of where the efforts are being devoted. So there is something to be said for, isolating those folks and teaching them the skills of innovation rather than the skills of engineering or finance or other things, because this is something you can in fact learn and you can in fact do well. So there is definitely, again, where it resides is potentially up for grabs, but there's a lot of advantages to having a dedicated team in this way for the process, not for the innovations themselves.
Great. Well, I think it's a great lead-in. I'm gonna actually go back to someone who has not only learned but has had great results, and that's Sabrina, of course. And Sabrina, I was wondering if you could, share a little bit of background about your innovation programs and what you guys are doing at Humana.
And Sabrina, maybe how it evolved to become a shared service model.
Well, as far as the shared service, we sit in a larger organization that is a shared service as well. So our team of 6 is shared services specifically for crowdsourcing and open innovation. And the beauty about our structure is that we have strategic partners that are also aligned with us who are part of the communications team. We have a partner in quality and process. We have partners in education, PMO. All of those folks are able to help align us to the different strategies and the priorities of the company, which, as Chip says, really helps us align to the right question for those problem areas that we're seeing that maybe the associates or the business areas aren't really being able to identify immediately, but we can pull that out of them by just asking some questions and really aligning those strategies to a specific problem opportunity statement to then pose to the audience that we want to have the challenge with. And as I mentioned earlier, we've been doing this for about 2 years now, and we started out having all of the same challenges that you had called out on the slide that you had there, where we're only a small team. How can we impact the company? We started out losing steam. The ideas are just sitting there, and there's no follow through. So as we started to build and mature our model, we really developed a program, as Chip was describing too, which is really, it's very similar to project management. We treat every idea challenge like a project. So we want to have a sponsor that will, be the champion for that idea challenge and that problem opportunity. They help us align to the goal that they want to get from the challenge, and really looking at it from what do you want to get out of this at the end, and how are you going to measure it. Those are some of the questions that we ask up front before we actually open up the challenge to the audience. So basically, we start out with a statement of work for any of our sponsors that really identifies them as a partner with us, so it holds them accountable as well to the end result. We document the scope of it. How large is it going to be? Who's the audience? What is the actual problem that we're trying to identify? Is there any data that would back that up? And then we identify key success metrics. How are you going to measure this? How are you going to know that this was actually successful? And I mentioned, too, that we have a communications partner as well. So we have a really robust communication plan where we can communicate to the associates and to the specific audiences that we're trying to target. We have not gone external yet with our challenges to our members and consumers, but that is really our ultimate goal, is to go external. We have had quite a bit of success, though, internally. We've had significant participation. If you look at, I'm sorry, I'm not on the WebEx because I've been traveling today, but if you look at the One Idea dashboard, you'll see we're showing here the log on and trends from the past 2 years that we've been running challenges with Bright Idea, and the growth of participation is rising. We've had around 62% of our entire enterprise associates participate in challenges, and and from the 62%, 94% of them have actually earned points within the system, meaning they're actually coming back to the challenge. They're logging ideas. They're commenting on other people's ideas. They're voting and promoting ideas of others. And we've actually ran 25 idea challenges in the 2 years that we've been running this, with over 4,500 ideas that have been captured. And what I had said earlier about, we were becoming, a pipeline for ideas. And then going back to the statement of work, when we did a statement of work, and when you're starting with the end in mind, as one of my slides here shows, you're really kind of doing a virtual focus group. So you're asking, these sponsors, what is your culture like? Have you done any previous collaboration efforts? What is the need for this? Trying to identify really what that culture will be, and will they be receptive to it? And then just to identify all of your stakeholders, really pinpoint and narrow down that topic that you're wanting to ask them about, and you gain agreement from them so that way you know that you're not just in this to gain ideas. You're in it because you want to find results, and you want to be able to share the so what with that team and with the company. So
great. That's great feedback. While you're talking a little bit about your process, can you walk us through a kind of a typical innovation campaign? What does it look like from your perspective? The typical process.
Well, I can give you an example of one that we've ran recently this summer. It was really more in line with the sustain innovation model that Chip talked about earlier, and really around process improvement. So reducing cycle time, and then also identifying efficiencies and effectiveness to improve our quality. We ran that with an audience of 2,400 associates internal to the organization. We had over 73% of participation from that audience that we targeted, and that's really due to the communications that we had, the leadership involvement. The topic was passionate. Our associates were passionate about that topic. We gathered 158 ideas from the 2,400 associates. We had significant cost savings that were identified from that challenge as well. And the reason I say that, I wanted to lead into, at the end of every challenge that we run, when we close out a challenge with our sponsors, my team of 6, whoever's leading that challenge, we actually provide to the sponsor a packet at the end of the challenge that shares with them the results, what were some of the trends that came out of it, what are the top ideas based on effort and impact analysis, and we also provide them a estimated cost benefits analysis for each of those top ideas. And we do that by working with some subject matter experts from that team, the sponsors team, to really identify those cost savings, or what would the potential effort be to implement something of that nature. So there's really a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to really share that end result with the client.
Great. Those are some great results. I appreciate you sharing those with all of us. Chip, do you have any results you can share too about some examples you've seen at other customers?
Oh, there's huge numbers of anecdotes, but again, there's other things that I'm just finishing a case study for a U.S. government agency that is currently closed. So the case study is on hold until they reopen and somebody answers the phone there. But they were involved in a very high volume, short duration kind of program, and they estimated that for it ran globally actually, and got participation from 9,000 people worldwide. And they estimated that for their $600,000 investment, and that included the people and the platform and technology and everything they put in to run the challenge, they estimated that the value produced in the solutions to the number of problems that they had thrown out to the community was something on the order of $10 to $14 million. And they estimated that by, through this open innovation program, by the value of the programmer time that was contributed to solve the problems, plus what they would have to go to the market to buy similar results from, except there was English in that sentence someplace, what they would have to spend if they contracted for the kind of things they got. So the combination of the cost avoidance and the value, they were able to estimate roughly a 20-to-1 return on investment on their innovation program. So there are huge, huge numbers like that people have been seeing. And then likewise, as you think about innovation in marketplaces, you think about companies that are now delivering their products and services on new business models. All of these are basically innovative, and what we need to be doing is thinking about how we make that innate in the company and how we make it something that's not random and something that's recurring and sustained. So the results are there. If you just look at the marketplace at the leading companies, you'll see companies that have embraced innovation. And the business value that they've generated is a direct result of those innovative activities.
That's a great example there, Chip. Matt, do you have an example as well, some results that you've seen?
Sure. Yeah, if you want to jump to slide 20, this is an example of one of our customers, and I love that Sabrina said begin with the end in mind, and that's something we talk about, because when you jump into one of these projects, there's a lot of moving parts. There's setting up logins and designing the system and sending out newsletters, but at the end of the day, it's about outcomes, it's about results, and the only way to sustain an innovation program and grow it, as Humana has over time, is to demonstrate a strong ROI. And I love how Chip went through not just the cost that you invest in that innovation initiative or project, but the cost of the program itself and the cost of implementing it and change management and everything else. So this is just a chart from one of our customers. It's a global company, 75,000 employees. And they're tracking in 3 different categories. They're tracking in new revenue generation, cost savings, and cost avoidance. And I think it's a really interesting chart because you can see they've been running the program for a long period of time. In the early days, they were more focused on new products and ideas that were going to generate revenue, and then they sort of shifted gears as the economy shifted to cost reduction, cost avoidance, and then around 2010 they got back on the horse for new revenue generation. So it's really flexible what you can do with these programs. You can have ideas in a lot of different areas, but I think it's absolutely essential to track the financial impact of the innovations, and I think it's part of this innovation as a shared service story, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to go to your manager and say, this is what the program's doing for the business. And I think as Sabrina and her team do, beginning with that end in mind, you can stay aligned that it's really all about getting ideas through the funnel and tracking the results that they're having.
Great, thanks, Matt. So measurement seems like a hot item that we're seeing, and I'm actually going to switch over to the audience Q&A at this point, and that some of the key themes we're seeing coming back in the Q&A that all you have is around measurement and metrics, and Matt gave some good examples around dollars. Sabrina gave some good examples around employee engagement. And Chip did some great examples around cost savings. Yeah, does anyone have any key measurements to really look at the quality and variance of ideas? I mean, what are some other ideas that the panelists have on metrics? Well, I guess we maybe start with Sabrina and see if she has other ones. Not looking for actual the real data, but maybe some examples of data that you could potentially share, Sabrina.
Sure. So with, well, probably all of our challenges, we look at specifically impact and effort. So how many people or how many members is this going to impact if we implement it? What are some of the savings that we would identify or that could be associated with this specific idea? And then as far as efforts too, what is the cost to implement this? How much time is it going to take for us to implement it? Is it going to be, something we can turn around really quickly within, 3 months? It could be implemented. Is it going to take 6 months, a year? Will IT costs be involved? So we look at all of those things as we, consider the ideas, as well as, really aligning it to the goal that the sponsor may have for the challenge. So, we've done some challenges where it's around associate engagement. So is this going to make our associates happy? Is it something that will increase their satisfaction scores for our employer? So it really just depends on the type of challenge, but I would definitely say impact and effort would be the primary for most of our challenges.
Great, Matt.
Yeah, lots of different ways that people try and capture this value that's being created. And, one of them we talked about early on in the presentation about culture of innovation. I've seen in large organizations, what people do is they actually put, 1, 3, or 5 questions into the corporate annual employee survey, and they ask specifically, do you believe our company is innovative? Do your managers listen to your ideas or give them a fair shake? They ask questions like that, and then they track that over time. Do you believe the company is taking steps to become more innovative? And then so they benchmark that. They say, okay, when I started, these numbers were 60%, 30%, 42%. And then all of a sudden they get hit with 5 crowdsourcing open innovation challenges over the course of a year, and you could start to move the needle that, yeah, I'm seeing more results in terms of innovation. I'm seeing more effort and energy and time put into it, and you start to move the needle. And those cultural measures really impact a lot of things. They impact recruiting. They impact job satisfaction. One of the largest reasons people leave a company is when they feel that the company's not giving their ideas a fair shake or not listening to their ideas.
That's great. I'm going to go a question to Chip now. The question was from the audience was, what is the role of the ISS on the back end? Meaning, you run a campaign, you get a bunch of ideas, then what happens? What are the services in a shared service or innovation teams model post coming up with the ideas?
Sure, and actually, if you want to go back, if you can call up that slide that had the capabilities on it, what we're talking about there. I can give you the number in a second. What we're really talking, it's number 11. Maybe it's not number 11. It's that one, 10. We're talking about the top of this, this piece. From ideation is what we're talking about, getting the ideas. Where there's an evaluation stage that sort of sits between ideation and incubation, which is what Sabrina was just talking about. But now, what do you do with them? And so, in many cases, I don't like the notion of a funnel because that implies a narrowing. What a lot of times you have is you have the combining and the refinement and the shelving for a while, but it may come back if the market changes. The swirling that goes around in that incubation stage, and that is generally speaking, again, it's treated as a project. When an idea is funded for incubation, there are a set of goals depending upon what you don't know. So if it's something, if you know about the product or service but don't know about the market, so the idea is maybe we take this product and sell it to a new market. Well, there are going to be a set of questions you're going to need to answer. And the innovation team can guide the people who are put on that to answer those questions. And then what resources do we need to find to help us to answer those questions? And then flip side is if we have, a market that we know, but we're looking to sell them or service them in a different way. There may be technical issues on the technology we want to use. Will it work? Is it cheap enough? How do we support it? How do we talk to it, electronically, get information from it? That's going to be a different set of questions. So you can start thinking that this team in the middle knows the right questions to ask and now can call in and help organize and act as the broker to get these questions answered and get them cycling around. And then that third category is, in theory, you're going to be doing this with multiple products and ideas. So you've got a sense of a portfolio you're measuring and managing. And just like you'd be managing a stock portfolio, you're going to want to be making sure that you're looking for innovations in product, in process, in market, and in organization, which are the four categories that actually the OECD uses to describe innovation. OECD being the global, global economics group that does studies of this and other subjects. You're also going to want to make sure you're looking in different time horizons. Which things may, potentially come to market in the next year, the next 2 years, the next 4 years. So maybe 3 time horizons. You're going to want to break your innovations up and look at them that way. So there needs to be an orderly process for moving things from ideas to selection, to incubation, to management, and then to commercialization. As the questions are answered positively, can we now write the business case and run it through our standard governance process? And in essence, see if that will be, now are we ready to look for 100% success on that? Or does it need to continue to stew in this bucket, for another 6 months or a year until something is right? So there's a lot of that back end, and it's project management, it's governance, it's portfolio management, and it needs to be actively managed to ensure that things don't languish and that the good ideas, in fact, are pursued, and then those that are promising are actively managed and marketed to the organization for them to then adopt. Hope that sort of nickel tour of what happens after somebody has an idea here.
Yeah, I think that helps a lot, Chip. And I was just curious. I wanted to just flip it back to Sabrina for a second. I mean, very simply, Sabrina, what's your team's role post challenges, post coming up with the ideas? What do you guys do?
Well, similarly to what Chip was just talking about, we also developed a process, and coincidentally, it's from some of the Forrester research that we did last year and talked with Chip too. But, we put a process together that we have a project manager that is on our team. Well, she's part of the 6, and we manage all of we manage them by going back to the different teams that we've presented the packet to and presented the different ideas to take action on. And she follows up with them on a regular basis to see, one, did they develop a project team? Did their CBA, their estimated CBA, match what we provided to them? And also, when are they going to implement it? And we follow up all the way to implementation of those ideas. Now, we are still in, the infancy of that, because this year was really where we started implementing this process. But it's really shown to be beneficial to us, because we're able to see that some of the ideas are moving forward, and some of them, for one reason or another, did not get pushed forward.
And just a quick thing to add to that as well, I've seen customers actually have a status, which I think this is a unique to ISS characteristic, but they have a status called handed off to the business unit. And the idea gets handed off, but they still take sort of high-level tracking responsibility, check back once a month, once a quarter on the progress of those initiatives, so that they can keep them in their tracking system and justify the ISS program at the end of the day.
There's a number of questions. This will be the final question from the audience, final question for the webinar, I should say. There's a lot of questions about org structure and also how it relates to getting buy-in support from middle management. I was curious, Matt, what's the typical org structure? Where do you see this live in an organization?
So the shared service is there's no single answer for that. The dedicated team can sit, reporting to like the C-suite. Sometimes it's nested within a broader function like R&D, or in a shared service organization where HR and IT sit. So we haven't seen a really dominant pattern in that yet. I'll leave it to Sabrina to talk about the composition of the team, because I think that's important about project managers, and we've seen, having people with sort of web design skills and also communication skills, and then also this sort of core innovation knowledge, and someone who's out there looking at what's going on with the open innovation world. But I'll leave it to her to do that. But I did see one question in the chat around how do you engage middle management, and I can speak to that. One of our customers, Motorola, who might actually be on the call, they were really effective with setting up a whole network of innovation champions. And these were sort of, lightweight, part-time liaisons to the innovation program. Motorola is a global organization, so they've got people in different geographies and, different, departments around the globe. And these were people that were either self-select or you have people nominate them to kind of have sort of like a extra star on their role as innovation champion, and they get communications from the dedicated innovation team. So if there's an upcoming challenge or if they need to hang up a poster in the break room, it's someone they can mail to. So I think that's been really effective in terms of engaging middle management. You give them, you can do some webinars to train those folks, give them a little extra, kind of innovation conceptual training. And that's a way to kind of stitch the whole thing together. So you have the open innovation to engage the frontline troops. You have your innovation champion network to engage the middle management, and then you have your dedicated innovation team that's working with stakeholders to identify their challenges.
Great, thanks, Matt, and honestly, thanks to all the panelists for all the valuable insights, and thanks to you, the audience, for taking the time to join us today for our session on getting started with innovation as a shared service. We'd like to invite you to join us for the next webinar in our Executive Roundtable webinar series called How to Build a Scalable ISS Program. We're really going to build on this session and walk you through the nuts and bolts of setting up the infrastructure for your ISS program. Everything from establishing stakeholder buy-in to collecting and assessing the results to actually measuring the outcomes. Stay tuned, and we'll send you a notice once we've finalized the dates for that exciting next webinar. Thanks again for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thanks, everyone.